Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast for Australia. All right, I'm going to be honest, as we look out at the near-term forecast versus the longer-range forecast, it's a competition between two different features. And I'm showing you this animation to begin with because as we progress through this forecast video and I start to get into things like the MJO and La Niña and its potential impacts, I want to let you understand, or I want you to understand, excuse me, that what's going on in the near term isn't linked to it at all. Or the links are loose at best. So this video may seem as though it has two parts to it. What is the future kind of driver of the climate system for this upcoming spring and summer across Australia versus what's going on now? So you've been staring at this long enough. I'm pretty excited about this. Take a look at the two pieces to the jet stream we have right now. So these are the winds about 6 miles above our heads. That would be our more subtropical branch of the jet. And then here is the polar branch. And look at that thing go. And why I'm a bit excited about this is because whenever we see a configuration of wind flow like this, especially as we're, in the springtime or approaching the springtime, this is the setup that gets us away from stuck weather patterns. Now, we've been talking about for months, the persistence of high and low pressure, either in the Tasman Sea or to our south or whatever. It's always been a question of where is the high pressure cell stuck? Now that debate, that talk is over right now. So here we go. This is a pretty exciting animation if you're a meteorologist. This is a pressure pattern forecast, and it's looking at anomalous pressure. So the blues or the cooler colors here would represent where there's lower than normal pressure, and the warmer colors higher than normal. What I want you to see is simply this. As I play it forward, there's regular movement in the pressure patterns. Nothing is really just getting stuck and not moving. Even out there, day 10, I'm already up to September 14th and beyond. The pattern is open and moving. And this is what we're talking about in this forecast video. With all that action right now, when do we start to make a transition to say, well, we're going to have to stop paying attention to the trough ridge pattern across our south? That would be the highs and lows. And start paying attention to the way that the tropics are influencing things, everything from the Indian Ocean dipole, which is still very negative, all the way up to, La Niña in the MJO movement. So take a look at this. Let me get out here. This is, of course, on Thursday afternoon and evening. Look at the size of this low pressure system here versus the size of this high. And the best news is that there is fast moving jet stream winds over the top of this, meaning it's all going to move. Whenever I see deep lows like this contrasting with large highs, we're expecting very, very strong winds out of these systems to come through. And of course, it'll be the orientation of their fronts as we swipe them from Western Australia all the way over to the East Coast in determining who gets the rain and how much. But I'll tell you something, seeing this flow, this movement through the next 14, 15 days, that's a pretty good signal. So the models are doing this. If we just look over the next 10 days, and this is the European model's 10-day forecast for precipitation as compared to normal. And there are clearly some regions in here that are expecting much above average precipitation. What'll be interesting is to compare this to other models, but to really see if we do stay drier in a few of these areas, which are highlighted here, some in Queensland, some in South Australia, and then also this corner of Western Australia. Just not seeing the flow, but there are certainly stripes that are very, very wet. But that's the European model solution. Look at the artificial intelligence. Very similar, right? That's the European model, operational run. This is the artificial intelligence run. Very similar overall structure to the pattern. And as we get out here further, and by the way, look at Tasmania, just very, very wet in this pattern. The GFS is by far the most aggressive on the rainfall. So this is a model, global forecasting system model. It's run in the United States. The other two models I just showed you are run out of Europe. And the GFS, though, is trying its hardest with a combination of a lingering front followed by a deep low that's going to really put down the rainfall here. And right now, the model's suggesting that the surplus is in the 50 to 100 millimeter range for this region. Again, can you almost see, though, it's got that drier stripe there and the drier stripe here. So Queensland, this is going to be a situation where overall we're not projecting very much rain out of this particular forecast for you. But question is, when do the fronts come through and what do they look like overall? And how strong are the winds with this? So take a look. This is a forecast. We're going to use miles per hour here, but we're looking at the forecast of maximum accumulated wind gusts. So we're just trying to see, when the model's bringing these storm systems through, how fast are the winds expected to be? And I'm only out here to next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And let's go ahead and throw the next system in there. Let's get 10 days on this. Shoot, let's go all the way out 15 days. Look at that last system there cutting across the ocean to our south. We put it all together, and if we blow this up a little bit, well, maybe I can't. How about I just open the image in a new tab, and then we can blow it up. There we go. These wind speeds are something else. Gusts with the next few systems in the 40, 50, 60 mile an hour range coming through. I mean, this is impressive to say the least. So given that we have a lot of activity right now being driven by our jet stream pattern, and we know that the future activity in spring and summer will likely be dominated by more tropical influences like the MJO or the La Niña as the jet sinks south, we better get in and see the timing of these systems. So let's shrink that back up so it looks full screen again. And I'm going to get into the European model right away. So here we are. Let's pick this up 9:30 a.m. Adelaide time on Thursday. So first push of rain's coming through. And what I'm noticing here in Western Australia, and this was brought to my attention by a group that visited me in Champagne from Australia last week. A great point to make here. This is the front. And you can see that the front is oriented more north-south. What the comment was is that when these folks just out of Western Australia say, hey, listen, every time we have a front that's more north-south, we just tend to get it. We tend to get much more rain. And I said, absolutely. When the fronts are aligned like this, what happens is you don't have the strength of the surface convergence of air to produce better rising motion, which squeezes more of the moisture out. Plus, you don't have the transport of the moisture on the backside, or excuse me, the transport of the flow on the backside to lift that moisture-laden air. But you orient these fronts north-south, and they produce. So in the overnight hours, really getting into, well, I should say Thursday, getting into Friday evening, this is when this first front comes through. And it's a rainmaker, and it curls up a low that hugs the coast. And this is always the story. Is the low here or is the low there? The closer they are to our southern shores, the better the chances are of rain. So where are we in time? This is Saturday night. Getting into Sunday, the front comes over to South Australia. We get into parts of Victoria, Tasmania, and then eventually here into New South Wales. And that's just round one. And that's going to have wind. And it's going to have some stronger storms, I think, at times, and also some locally very heavy rain. Now, round two, this is Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday. So what happened? That low left and stalled out a front here. And so this is going to be a corridor around which we're going to watch for some heavy rain early next week. But then what we notice is on the tail end of it, look at this. This is next Wednesday. Another low forms and spins itself up right here on the border between New South Wales and Victoria. And as it sits there and spins, it could deliver some locally heavy rain. One of the big differences between the European model, which is the one we're looking at, and the GFS I showed you a moment ago, is just the size of this low. It's much bigger in the GFS, and the front lingers here longer, meaning more precipitation in that corridor in the GFS versus the European, which is what we're looking at here. Well, let's keep going. That low moves out into the Tasman Sea and then eventually hits New Zealand. It's going to be a big snowmaker at high elevation in New Zealand. And then there's the high that follows. But already, remember I told you this is active? There's your next frontal boundary trying to come through by September 13th. If we add all this up, whoops, I clicked on precipitation anomalies. We've seen that. Let's go to total precipitation. Have a look. Here we go. First system's going through right there. Big front sweeps. Now we start to see these rainfall totals, 40, 50 mils of rain, locally heavier. That front then gets over through parts of South Australia into Victoria, Tasmania, and then watch. The frontal boundary stalls out early next week. And watch your eye right here. Keep your eye right there. We see the rainfall adding up in that corridor. And when it's all said and done, influenced here by the higher elevation, we could have some pockets down here that pick up 100 to maybe 200 millimeters of rainfall. And all the while, drier and drier. Okay, so what it takes to bring in a lot of rainfall this time of year here is you got to plant high pressure off the coast, draw that moisture in to bring the rainfall up in parts of Queensland. We just don't fully see that at this particular stage. Okay, from there, what about next week? So let's look out there at the 11th through the 17th. Remember, I showed you already there's another front coming into Western Australia. But the models are pretty similar on the week 2 forecast. This is that GFS forecast for week 2, and this is the European. And you can see that once the high pressure settles in behind these next two systems, we're drier in this corridor, but we're wetter along the coast. And that's because of the better flow that's coming around from the east while the next front settles into Western Australia. So that's it. I mean, right now in the near term, the pattern is quite active, and the probabilities of getting precipitation are relatively high across those corridors we discussed. So are the changes in temperature. This is what our last 7 days have looked like. We've been much colder than average in the interior. Some places here, 7, 8, 9 degrees C below their normal just in the last 7 days. But the temperature pattern's going to be pretty wild going forward. Ahead of these next systems, major warm-up. See this? Next 5 days, quite hot for this time of year in this region. 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees C above average over a 5-day stretch. Then, as you know, the systems roll through, so that means the 8th through the 13th cool off. But as expected, when the high pressure shifts and we bring in warmer conditions again, that's why the 13th through the 18th are back up. Now, you probably notice I'm talking fast. This is always exciting. When the pattern is active, there's always something great to talk about, and you need to monitor this day in and day out. But I want to know, when is there a real transition away from this? And what is it going to look like? Those are the big questions we're going to ask. One other thing, though, quickly on temperatures. If we just take a look at the fluctuations here, they're pretty wild. Overlaid are the temperatures at given time intervals. So this would be, if we get out here to Thursday, that's Thursday afternoon. A lot of temperatures above 30 C here. It's still cold at our highest elevation and also in Tasmania. But watch, as we go into Friday, look at these Friday afternoon highs. Getting into, Saturday afternoon, we're really cooking here, getting temperatures quite warm. But that front swipes through, and what we see is we're going to have temperatures in the early morning hours in Western Australia down in the single digits. So prepare for that. It's going to get quite chilly here. And then that front swipes through and it confines all of that, warmer air to the north. In fact, I'm going to go back right there. There we go. And what you've got is contrast right in through this area. So the warmer air to the north, the cooler air to the south, that's your front. And that's why we're going to squeeze that moisture out early next week, right in this corridor. Now, I want you to take note that next Wednesday morning, we've got a widespread area here across some key agricultural districts that are going to be seeing single-digit, overnight lows. And then as we go farther, that's next Thursday morning. Getting on to next Friday morning, we've got frost happening at our high elevations here. Cold in Tasmania, cold in New Zealand as well. So I just wanted to give you that rundown of the temperatures real quick. Okay, this is the bigger picture now. This is the switch in the discussion. Our current ocean temperatures, there's no doubt about it that we have got La Niña-like ocean temperatures, but is the atmosphere doing La Niña-like things? Because not only do we have, this configuration in the Pacific, but there's definitely a negative Indian Ocean dipole setting up. So I'm going to just show you a few things. One, how cold are the ocean temperatures? Well, this morning they're at negative 0.826 degrees C. So that's well below our threshold of 0.5 degrees C below average. And here we are. And it's a pretty clear trend. So it's not just some anomalous blip. There's another thing to think about. How long does this potential La Niña last? Well, one of the models we run in North America called the CFS version 2, the Climate Forecasting System. It's not the best model, okay? It's just not. But I think it is probably right on that. And what I mean is, this could be a spring-heavy La Niña that fades hard in summer. So in other words, unlike ones we've had in the past, which go all the way to March before they make their turn, this one probably we're going to be talking about by December, maybe running out of juice. That's a possibility. So thinking about that, I want to show you a couple of things. Let's go from that map to this one. Here we go. Are we seeing La Niña-esque behavior in the atmosphere? Okay, look at the winds. What is a La Niña? La Niñas are strong trade winds coming out of the Pacific. Indian Ocean dipole, look at that. Look at that turn right there, giving you all that upwelling of cold water. That means you're going to have more warm water in this area and cold water upwelling on either side, which we saw here and we saw there. So that makes sense. But sometimes it's the anomalous winds you have to look at. In other words, are the trade winds stronger than average? Now, this is the time of year where I don't typically look at the Southern Oscillation Index. That measures the pressure between Tahiti and Darwin. I'm going to look more at just the anomalous winds. And what I'm looking for here, see these two areas, are the vectors and the color shading indicating winds like that. Those are stronger trades. And look right over there. See how they're anomalously strong in that way. You say, tell me again what La Niña is. La Niña is this: stronger trades, reverse trades, rising motion. And that's what's key in trying to decipher where this is going to go. So the ocean temperatures have been doing this. This is starting in June, going into the month of July right now. Now watch. As we finish July and start the month of August, look at the cool water here and the cool water there. Well, the warm pool lives in this area. That is what we expect when there's a La Niña. And if the ocean temperatures continue to respond with cooling across the Pacific, we have to know, is there more cool water to upwell, and is it anomalously cool? So now I'm trying to make this case, like what should spring and summer maybe behave like if La Niña dominates? So this is the South American coast, and over here is Australia, and I'll just put an I for Indonesia, okay? So we're right on the equator. And I'm looking for this cool blob as you go down deep into the ocean. And if that continues to rise up here and replace the warmer water, that's another indicator that the trade winds are pushing all that warm water here. And as it does that, I need to know, and you saw me flash this map a minute ago, what is that going to do to where the deepest convection will be? Now, this is what's important. In the month of August, we have seen the best rising motion in the atmosphere living somewhere in here, mainly somewhere right in that area. Now, as you progress into spring, if there was true La Niña-like factors, you would expect this to move just a little bit here, maybe living over in what we call phase 4 or 5, or maybe a little bit into 6 of the MJO. And that's the construct of the atmosphere that I'm going to explain to you as I start to wrap this video up. Okay, so you saw the near term, all dominated by jet stream dynamics, all to our south, right? At some point in spring, we have to get into this discussion. So we go here. The MJO, is it getting into phase 5? Because that would be true like La Niña-like behavior. Not really. From now all the way through mid-October, if I had to pinpoint where that MJO was going to live, I'd say it's much more phase 3. Now, if this is wrong and it slides more over here, then boy, La Niña, everything I've told you about La Niña, me being skeptical about it, all that's washed. It's all gone. And now we're going to say, oh yeah, La Niña, La Niña, La Niña. But what you're looking at here is where the best rising motion in the world is versus where all the sinking air is. And this is just it to the T. Look, the trade winds blow stronger than average. We have winds coming like this. They all meet in this area. And that's where the rising motion is going to be. You can actually see it in the diagram. Right there is where the best rising motion is. So here's what I want to know. If we get that happening, if it's truly La Niña, and this slides over to phase 5, this is what history would say September should look like. There is a much stronger correlation with wetter than average conditions across the eastern half of Australia. Because right there, can you almost see it? Sinking motion in these colors. Look at that. Rising motion there. So trade winds, reverse trade winds, rising motion. That would be it to the T. But I don't think we're there. And I'm going to make a case for that to tell you why I'm skeptical of any forecast that paints the entire eastern half of Australia wet. I think it's too biased to La Niña. And here's my reason why. First thing, what did I tell you need to have the MJO if we're going to have just full-on, big-time La Niña-like weather in spring? It's got to be phase 4 or 5. It's got to be over here. And right now, it's nowhere near that. We saw BOM's forecast take the MJO way out here and then sweep it through phases 5, 6, and 7, and then bring it over to 1, 2. What actually happened? It barely got out of null space right there, and now they're predicting it to come around and maybe live somewhere here as we approach the rest of September and October. And that tells me I cannot start resting on the tropics. Maybe it's the MJO, maybe it's La Niña, I don't know. I can't rest on it just yet as the dominant factor. So Eric, you better keep your attention on this. That's what I'm telling myself right now. But let's come back to it just to make a case for what would happen. You see, if we could sweep over into phases 4, 5, 6 and leave it there, especially into phase 4 or 5, look what history would tell us. We would want, if you're in the eastern half of Australia, yeah, phase 5, phase 6, those are wet phases. That's what this color shading means. But where did I just show you it going? Phase 1, phase 2. And we tend to have a little bit of a drier signal in through here during that time. Now, if you're watching me and you're in Western Australia, like, hey, what about us? No, this is not a factor for you right now. It's just not. It's the wrong time. You are wholly focused on fronts right now. I'm just talking about the East in this particular case. So that is the big difference. So are we going to get the MJO to give us some sort of a signal as it moves forward? And should I trust these historical correlations? Let me tell you why I don't. This is the newest forecast from September 7 to October 7 from the GFS Extended. Now look where it's wetter. There. Little wetter here. And wetter here. See that? That tells me, Eric, you better pay attention to that southern jet stream behavior. And they've got drier into the interior of Queensland. Now that's one model. How about another one? This is the European weeklies. They're a little wetter here, but not this overarching wet everywhere in this area, which is what La Nina would say. Now, I'm just going to do some compare and contrast because BOM, excuse me, I think that their September forecast, and I need to read their full discussion, by the way, I think their September forecast is very much leaning on La Nina taking over. And I would also make the argument that that's probably what they've got for September through November. That right there. I mean, look at the correlation. That's just September, but it looks the same if I put October, November on it. They're really aggressively saying, hey, I think La Nina is going to be a factor. And I'm telling you, just be skeptical. Now, there will be regional differences, but I'm saying if this was truly dominated by La Nina, these short-term forecasts, well, they're actually medium-range forecast models. They're out to October 7. We would just see much more aggressive wet in here across a broader area. I'm talking to you, Queensland. Now, you did notice, just to make a point about this, the differences down in New South Wales and Victoria. If I go back to the GFS Extended, see, there's not even a lot of agreement there. So I'm just going to say this. In the foreseeable future, I would put much more weight on the position and strength of the trough ridge pattern developing high and low pressure systems that come through with a cadence across the southern tier of Australia. And that's going to be the most dominant factor. That is the main point I wanted to make today. That's it. But of course, we've got to look beyond this. So why not? Just want to make a point. European seasonal model, which is going to update in 3 or 4 days. I'm going to give you the new European seasonal model forecast very, very soon. It looks like every other model. And it's the main context to what I told you in the last video. They're all of the long range models are going to look wet. That's September, October, November. This is October, November, December, November, December, January, December, January, February. See how they all have the same flavor. And even the long range outlook from a group of models we run in North America. See, same thing. But all of these models have bid into La Nina dominating the factor. And I am just, this La Nina is nuanced. Now, I hope I'm wrong. Hope you all get the amount of rain you want. I am just going to sit here and say, prove it. Prove to me that we're going to get this situation rolling in the direction that we see here with this La Nina in order to make a call on it. Because we've had 4 La Ninas in the last 5 years, and every one of them has had a different flavor, right? So what's the flavor of this one? Now, to finish this all up, now that you've seen these long-range models again, can I come back and just give you a quick international update? We've watched pretty rapid drought expansion across key growing areas in the United States. It's probably taken the top end of the yield off of our corn and soybean crops, just to name a couple. We have some trouble with our cotton crop too in parts of Texas after a really wet spring. Got very hot and dry in late summer, and we think that that's been detrimental. Overall, though, the crop is still large, especially for corn and soybeans. But our Mississippi River, which is our biggest river system in the United States, it is just today slipped below low stage, which means the river has come down since April over 40 feet. That's just kind of scary. There's a huge storm system heading toward really the British Isles, Great Britain, this area, over the next few days. Big one, big winds, lots and lots of rain. But we're drier in the Russian wheat belt right now and also in parts of Ukraine. There's a stalled out front that's just north of the Yangtze River that's bringing in very, very wet conditions here. And we are monitoring, if I come across the Pacific, sorry, let me go back over to this side of the image. There's a hurricane headed toward Hawaii, and that's going to be an interesting one to watch. But I'd say the biggest player right now in terms of who's next to be watching for some of the big global grains is going to be the Brazilian plant. So they're allowed to start planting. Well, they were allowed 2 days ago to start planting in Paraná, which is here. The rest of Brazil will either go on the 7th or the 14th of September if they're allowed. But all the flooding rains are down here in southern Brazil, getting into parts of northern Argentina. And we're waiting on the monsoon to arrive. If you're interested in the corn and soybeans, really soybeans, which is the first major crop going in this part of Brazil, what you want to know is how much planting have they got done by November the 1st. October is a key month for planting. If they're behind on November the 1st, that's going to be a major signal that their crop calendar is going to be quite compressed going into the rest of their growing season. So we'll watch it carefully. Let's keep reporting back to you. In the meantime, listen, this is what you focus on. Let's set the La Niña rhetoric aside for a little while and just understand what this very active time period in terms of the progression of high and low pressure systems is going to mean. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks.